The room was sealed. No phones, no assistants, no noise except the faint hum of the projector on the wall, in red letters. The slide read, "Urgent Fraud Exposure." And there, at the center of it all, was my name, Sloane Mercer. I could almost hear the air leave the room when legal dropped the binder on the table. Litigation hold. The words landed heavier than the sound itself. Across the glass, Marta Dwyer leaned forward, jaw tight. Richard Hale sat stone still, eyes fixed on the screen, refusing to look at the empty chair beside him. Trevor's chair. 15 years of silence and loyalty reduced to evidence tags and timestamps. My name had become a headline inside the company I built line by line, shipment by shipment. Outside, the rain streaked down the windows of the South Lake Union Tower, turning the skyline into a blurred reflection clean, efficient, and trembling beneath the surface. 3 days ago, I was just another employee leaving late, soaked, tired, still believing hard work was enough. But by the time the binder hit that table, the truth had already begun to unspool from a false bottom drawer in my Beacon Hill home. Sunday, 11:40 p.m. The rain outside the ER windows pulsed like static, each drop sliding down the glass under the pale blue lights. I stood at the reception counter, clutching my mother's insurance card, my voice low and steady from practice more than calm. The nurse didn't look up when she said, "Early intervention's not covered unless she's admitted for a major event." A major event. Those were the words they used for a life. I signed the consent anyway, tapping my card on the reader before I could think about the balance. The machine beeped, and I told myself it was just another invoice, another file to reconcile later. They wheeled my mother past the curtain, a thin blanket tucked under her chin. Her hand reached for mine, small and shaking, and I smiled like everything was fine. "I'll be here," I whispered, though my mind was already dividing numbers, rearranging hours. At 2:17 a.m. The fluorescent lights in the waiting area flickered. My phone buzzed a text from Eva Mom. "Can I defer tuition for 1 semester? Just until we're caught up," I typed. "We'll figure it out," then deleted it. I wanted to sound strong, certain. I wrote "Don't worry about it," hit send, and stared at the message until the screen dimmed. By dawn, the rain hadn't stopped. My coffee had gone cold, somewhere between the hum of the vending machine and the nurse's soft footsteps. I realized I hadn't slept in 2 days. When they finally said my mother was stable, relief didn't come, only a quiet exhaustion that settled into my bones. I drove home through empty streets, the city still half asleep, and the first thing I saw when I opened the door was the drawer in my desk, the one with the false bottom I hadn't touched in years. Monday, 6:30 a.m. The house was still half dark when I walked in, shoes leaving faint tracks across the hardwood. I didn't bother turning on the lights. I knew every creak, every corner. The coffee maker sputtered to life, the sound rougher than usual. I set my bag on the kitchen table and opened my laptop, the blue glow filling the quiet room. The overnight reports loaded slowly: Tacoma, Everett, Portland. One flagged delay in Spokane, but the pharmaceutical shipment I'd pre-cleared was still on schedule. Temperature-controlled, high-value, life-dependent. I hovered over the command key that could halt the route, then pulled my hand back. Some lines you don't cross, even when everything else is falling apart. When I turned toward my desk, the morning light caught the edge of the drawer, the one I'd been pretending not to see for years. My fingers brushed the handle, and before I knew it, I'd pulled it open. A thin layer of dust, then the click of wood shifting against wood. The false bottom lifted just enough to show what was underneath a silver USB drive, wrapped in masking tape, and a manila folder marked Employment Agreement 2009. The sight of it felt like touching a scar, familiar, sealed over, but still tender. I stared for a long time, tracing the ink of my own signature on the corner of the contract. Clause 9D. I could still see it in my mind, sharp as the day I wrote it. I closed the folder and pressed the drawer shut until it clicked, Not yet, I said quietly to the empty room. Outside, a truck horn echoed down the hill, signaling the first departures of the day. I took a breath, grabbed my coffee, and told myself to move. The notification pinged just as I was rinsing my coffee mug. Subject ASAP come to HQ. No greeting, no signature. Just the kind of message that carries its own chill. By 8:20 I was standing in front of the Haleport Tower, my reflection warped in the glass doors. The lobby smelled like polished stone and expensive silence. Upstairs, the executive floor was already buzzing. Leah from HR stood near my office, eyes darting anywhere but mine. When I opened the door, Trevor Hale was sitting in my chair. My coffee mug had been moved to the other side of the desk. He smiled like he'd been rehearsing it. "Sloane," he said, "your role has been deemed non-essential." I didn't answer right away. The word non-essential seemed to hang between us, sterile and final. On the table, a folder waited, thin but heavy. Leah's hand trembled as she pushed it toward me. Her perfume was the same citrus one I'd given her years ago after her promotion. Behind the termination form, a small sticky note clung to her clipboard, mortgage approval pending First National Bank. Trevor cleared his throat. Impatient. "Security will collect your badge in the lobby." I took the pen, signed my name once, then slid the folder back to him. "Optimize this," I said, quietly enough that he almost missed it. Leah's eyes lifted for a second, full of something like apology, then dropped again. Outside, the rain had started to fall sideways, soaking through my coat before I reached the crosswalk. The city kept moving trucks, buses, briefcases while 15 years of my life fit neatly inside a single envelope. I didn't look back. By the time I reached home, it was barely past 8:30. The rain had followed me all the way from downtown, misting through the cracks of my umbrella, clinging to my sleeves. I left my coat by the door and stood still for a moment, the silence of the house pressing in. On the hallway wall hung my mother's old frame, her handwriting etched beneath the glass. "Don't get even. Get everything." She'd said it once when the power company overbilled her $50 and refused a refund. It had made me laugh then. Now it didn't. I walked into the study, set my bag on the floor, and pulled open the drawer. The false bottom gave way easily this time, like it had been waiting for me. The silver USB was still there, wrapped in 2 layers of tape, its corners dulled by time. Beneath it lay the manila folder employment agreement, 2009. Clause 9D was marked with a yellow tab, the paper faintly creased where my thumb used to rest. I read the first few lines and felt the old pulse return, the one that had kept me awake through coding marathons, debugging under kitchen light. I hadn't written it for revenge. I'd written it for protection, for fairness, for the version of me that believed contracts mattered. The clock ticked past 9. I reached for my phone, scrolled through the contacts, and found the number I hadn't used in years. Alvarez. Counsel. When she picked up, her voice was as steady as I remembered. "Sloane Mercer," she said, a trace of surprise. "I need a lunch appointment." I replied, "Today, if possible. Bring everything," she said simply. "I will." I answered, setting the folder on the table. The memory of that year never really left me. 2009, the winter the company almost folded. Back then, my office was the kitchen table, a stack of ramen cups beside a laptop held together with tape. Haleport was losing contracts faster than it could process shipments, and the routing software was a disaster. Trucks crossing paths, cargo lost, clients furious. I'd stayed up 72 hours straight rewriting the backbone from scratch. I called it caldera, after the volcanic ridge that forms when something explodes but refuses to die. When the system went live, the metrics jumped overnight, efficiency up 34%, losses down to nearly 0. Trevor's father, Richard, had shaken my hand in the hallway and said, "You saved us." Mercer. They offered me a bonus. I declined. What I asked for instead was paper protection in writing. Clause 9D. 3 lines, buried deep in a 15-page employment agreement. Any intellectual property created on personal equipment remained mine. Upon company revenue exceeding $400 million, I'd receive 2% equity. No structural changes could proceed without board consent if Caldera stayed active. And the clause would sunset only if the system's core was modified a safeguard I documented with my own hash chain, proving every original commit was untouched. 15 years later, the core still pulsed under every Haleport shipment. Same code, same logic. My digital fingerprint burned into every route. They never paid the equity. They never requested board approval. And by firing me without review, they'd breached their own walls. I folded the contract again, feeling the weight of those paragraphs thin as paper, sharp as a blade. Some swords don't hang on walls. They wait quietly in drawers. The drive to Alvarez's office took 40 minutes, long enough to feel every ache I'd ignored for years. My lower back pulsed with the dull rhythm of exhaustion, the price of too many nights hunched over a screen. The Subaru's heater coughed out lukewarm air. The dashboard light, flickering like it, too, was tired of holding on. I passed a billboard for Haleport Logistics, Trevor's grin plastered beside the words, "Redefining Efficiency." He drove a Porsche now. The contrast was almost poetic. Alvarez reviewed the contract in silence, the tip of her pen tracing the edge of Clause 9D. They never paid equity, she asked. Not a cent. Her brow arched slightly. Then you're sitting on a live claim. Sloane. A big one. Outside her window. Seattle moved as if none of it mattered. Cranes, ferries, gray skies. I nodded, but my mind was already on the control panel I'd left open at home. Caldera was still running. One command could freeze every Haleport route dependent on my code, including the pharmaceutical shipment scheduled for that morning. For a second, I let my cursor hover over the remote dashboard on my phone. The suspend route toggle blinked in quiet temptation. Then I locked the screen. People needed that shipment insulin, cardiac meds, time-sensitive cargo. I wouldn't weaponize the thing I built to save lives. When I got home, the rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of it. My mother was asleep, Eva's message unread on my phone. I sat at the kitchen table, hands flat on the wood, feeling both empty and steady. Some power isn't meant to be used. Some power is knowing you could. By Monday evening, Trevor had already begun his parade. Haleport's intranet banner showed him smiling beside the caption "Restructuring for the Future." On LinkedIn, the interns reposted his photo with the kind of enthusiasm that comes from wanting to be seen. Leadership in action. Next-gen logistics. He was celebrating what he called a clean house. By Tuesday morning, the shine began to peel. At 9:12 a.m., the Tacoma port client flagged a misrouted shipment worth $12 million. By noon, an electronics supplier from San Jose reported missing invoices, $8 million in equipment unaccounted for. The operations dashboard lit up like a fever chart. I didn't have to log in to know what was happening. Caldera's system had a logic of its own. Remove the wrong hands, and it started to choke on inconsistencies. The routes still ran, but the structure beneath them strained under its own precision. My precision. At the office, slack threads turned cautious. Did anyone actually disable Caldera? Someone wrote. S. Mercer is still listed as owner on the build registry. No one replied. Late that night, Leah's name appeared in my inbox. A single message, no subject line, just a forwarded screenshot from an internal chat. He used my old review scores against me, said my mortgage would vanish if I didn't sign. Beneath it, the date of her termination memo, the same morning as mine. I read it twice, then saved it to an encrypted folder. The rain had started again, drumming against the window like a slow warning. Trevor thought he'd erased me, but the system he'd inherited was beginning to whisper his name in all the wrong places, and the noise was getting louder. Tuesday, 8:40 a.m. The audit room on the 21st floor was quiet except for the hum of the servers. Arun Patel, senior systems engineer, leaned closer to the screen as the line of code refreshed. Each update left a digital watermark at the base of the repository, the same phrase repeating through thousands of entries. C. S. Mercer Caldera. He scrolled again, slower this time, until the pattern filled the screen. It wasn't a glitch. It was ownership. The door opened behind him. Trevor Hale stepped in, tie loosened, a confidence that bordered on manic. "Arun," he said lightly, "we're cleaning up the code base. Erase the Mercer tags. Call it modernization. There's a bonus if it's done before lunch." Aaron hesitated. "Those tags are embedded in the core. Removing them will alter the checksum." Trevor's smile thinned. "Then alter it." When the door closed, Aaron sat still for a long moment. He'd heard rumors, whispers in Slack. Leah's sudden exit, the mounting chaos in operations. He printed one page of code, the watermark clear and visible, and slid it under his keyboard. A quiet insurance policy. At 9:11 a.m., he zipped the logs, attached the screenshots, and drafted a short email to HR and legal. Subject: "This makes me uncomfortable." By noon, the servers slowed. Legal issued a full litigation hold, freezing all repositories and backups. The internal audit team began tracing the invoices Trevor had pushed through his vendor. The trail was clean until it wasn't Cascade Analytics LLC, a shell company registered to a college address and funneled over $68 million in consulting fees. By the time Trevor realized what had happened, the evidence was already archived. The code had spoken and it hadn't chosen him. Wednesday, 11:00 a.m. The rain had softened into a steady whisper against the windows when Alvarez hit send. Her screen showed my name in the header, followed by the 5-paragraph memo we'd written together addressed to board-only distribution. Inside, it was everything they needed to see Clause 9D, the Caldera hash chain proving the code remained untouched, the screenshots of the watermark, the unpaid equity ledger, and the summary of Trevor Hale's procedural and financial violations. Each attachment time-stamped, verified, impossible to explain away. 15 minutes later, the replies began. Marta Dwyer. "When are you available for discussion, Janet Cho?" "We need to talk today." By noon, Haleport's executive floor was sealed for an emergency session. Trevor's name was still on the attendance roster, but his chair stayed empty. Security had been told he was unavailable. Alvarez and I sat 2 floors below, in her quiet office overlooking the bay. While the conference feed scrolled updates in real time, legal counsel summarized the findings: intellectual property infringement under Clause 9D, contract breaches on equity, and fraudulent shell vendor funneling exceeding $68 million. Someone up there asked if the damage could be contained. Someone else mentioned arbitration. Alvarez was ready for that. She drafted a temporary restraining order, a preemptive block against any watermark scrubbing or repository tampering during evidence preservation. She sent the draft to Marta before anyone had the courage to adjourn. When the session ended, Alvarez turned to me. "They'll call within the hour," she said. "They have to. The exposure's too large to bury." I nodded, but the truth was already set in motion. For years, Trevor had hidden behind his father's company name, confident the system would protect him, but the system was built on my code and it had just run its audit. By early evening, the rain had turned heavy again, tracing rivers across the kitchen window. I heard the knock before I saw the car, Haleport's black sedan, idling in front of the house, headlights cutting through the mist. When I opened the door, Richard Hale stood there in a windbreaker, no tie, no entourage. He looked smaller without the boardroom around him. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place where Caldera had first been written. I set 3 folders between us. "The first," I said, sliding it forward, "is a contractor return I'll serve as technical auditor for the transition. It gives Haleport operational veto on Caldera's core changes, so long as they're documented. He nodded once, not speaking. The second is a complete reconciliation full equity, back pay, and a 2-year enterprise license. Standard renewal terms, no hidden clause. His eyes flicked up at that. You're not suing, I don't need to. I opened the third folder letters of intent, clean and crisp. I've already met with Redwood Freight in Portland. Their system's down 2 quarters in a row, and a private equity fund is ready to seed Caldera as SaaS. I have an exit path either way. For a long moment, only the clock filled the silence. Richard's hand hovered above the papers, the rain hitting harder now, as if marking the seconds. You built something remarkable, he said finally. His voice carried the weight of both admission and defeat. I built it to work. I replied. He exhaled, signed once, and pushed the folder back toward me. No handshake, no apology, just the sound of pen on paper, closing the distance between us. Thursday, 9:30 a.m. The boardroom lights were softer than usual, as if even the building understood what was about to happen. Marta Dwyer stood at the head of the table, reading from a printout that trembled slightly in her hands. Clause 9D, she began, her voice steady, remains in force. The core system of Caldera has not been modified, and as such, ownership and oversight provisions remain active. Across the room, the legal counsel confirmed the figures nearly 70% of Haleport's current logistics network still ran on Caldera's original backbone. The sunset clause was dormant, untriggered. On the screen behind them, the demo flickered to life, a live dashboard, each route marked with the words, powered by S. Mercer IP Holdings. Underneath, vendor letters had begun to stack in legal's inbox formal requests demanding intellectual property disclosure before further integration. No one looked at Trevor's empty chair. It was just there, like an echo. When the vote came, it wasn't dramatic. Marta raised her hand first, then Janet Cho, then the rest, one by one. The motion passed full reinstatement, retroactive compensation, and a new title carved out just for Optics Executive Technical Director, Founding Architect. Alvarez texted me the update as I waited in the cafe downstairs. Her message was simple, unanimous. You're back in? I stared at the phone for a long time, the words hovering over the reflection of my coffee. Somewhere above, the company that had erased me was now running under my name again, line by line, clause by clause, proof written in every packet of code. The rain outside had stopped, but the air still smelled like change. By 11 that morning, the congratulatory emails had already started coming in subject lines full of corporate warmth, thinly veiled relief. Welcome back, Sloane. Thrilled to have you on board again. You saved us. I read none of them. Instead, I signed one final document not with Haleport, but with Redwood Freight. Their general counsel sat across the table, pen poised, as I reviewed the SaaS license. Multi-tenant, 2-year renewable, all rights retained under S. Mercer IP Holdings. Caldera would no longer belong to any single company. It would serve the industry on my terms. Arun Patel arrived with a small duffel and a quiet nod. You really did it, he said. I handed him his new access credentials. Welcome to the rebuild, I told him. Minutes later, Leah's message appeared a forward of the internal chat logs, proof of Trevor's coercion and the threats about her mortgage. I archived them under a new clause I'd added to every license automatic whistleblower protection for participating employees. If Haleport tried to retaliate again, the system itself would record it. By afternoon, a major pharmaceutical client sent a statement thanking Haleport for maintaining uninterrupted insulin shipments during the investigation. I smiled faintly. The one decision I'd made without vengeance had kept the whole network running. Before leaving the building, I stopped by Alvarez's office to hand her a flash drive for safekeeping. Change the passwords first. I said, half in jest, I don't trust what's still in his inbox. That evening, Caldera's homepage went live clean white background. One tagline in gray from kitchen code to industry standard. The rain had finally cleared. I stood by the window, phone in hand, and dialed Eva. She answered on the first ring. "Your tuition's covered," I said softly. This time, for real.